Why does something that once felt so important suddenly feel uncertain? Yet there is a deeper question that few people consider. What if the departure is not random? What if what appears to be loss is actually divine intervention? What if heaven sees what earth cannot? There is a tendency within us to believe that every closed door is a tragedy. We assume every ending is evidence that something has gone wrong. Yet many of the greatest acts of mercy arrive disguised as disappointment. A traveler crossing a dangerous bridge may feel frustrated when the road is blocked. He may believe the obstacle is his enemy. Only later does he discover the bridge ahead had collapsed. The very thing that appeared to hinder him was the thing that saved him. So it is with many relationships. God often sees dangers hidden behind smiles, intentions concealed behind words, and futures that remain invisible to human eyes. What appears harmless today may become destructive tomorrow. What feels comforting now may eventually hinder the destiny God has prepared for you. This June, some of you may witness a surprising separation. Someone may become distant. Someone may walk away. Someone may no longer hold the place they once held in your life. And while your first reaction may be confusion, heaven is inviting you to see beyond the surface. Not every departure is abandonment. Not every ending is failure. Not every goodbye is a curse. Sometimes God removes one person because He loves you too much to allow them to remain where they no longer belong. There is a profound difference between what we choose and what God permits. We often cling to things because they feel familiar. God evaluates them according to whether they serve His purpose. A child may cling to a broken toy because it is beloved. A wise parent removes it because it is dangerous. The child sees loss, the parent sees protection. Likewise, many people resist divine separation because they only see the present moment. God sees the months, years, and consequences ahead. The truth is that some individuals enter our lives carrying lessons, not permanence. They are meant to teach, reveal, awaken, or challenge us. Their assignment was never to stay forever. Yet when the season ends, we often attempt to preserve what God is already releasing. We pray for peace while holding on to chaos. We ask for growth while clinging to limitation. We seek freedom while refusing to let go of chains we have mistaken for companionship. And then we wonder why our souls feel heavy. The remarkable thing about God is that He often answers prayers in ways we do not expect. You may have prayed for clarity. God removes confusion. You may have prayed for protection. God removes danger. You may have prayed for progress. God removes obstacles. Yet because those obstacles sometimes have names and faces, the answer can initially feel painful. The chosen ones are often called into seasons where separation becomes necessary, not because they are superior to others, but because purpose requires refinement. Gold must pass through fire. A seed must separate from its shell. An eagle must leave the nest. Growth and separation have always walked together. There are blessings that cannot enter a crowded room. There are opportunities that cannot emerge while old attachments occupy the space. There are levels of spiritual maturity that cannot be reached while certain influences continue speaking into your life. God understands this. That is why divine removal is often an act of preparation. The person leaving may not be evil. They may not even be aware of the role they played. Yet God knows whether their presence aligns with where He is taking you. And if it does not, He may lovingly and firmly create distance. This June, if a relationship changes unexpectedly, resist the temptation to interpret every ending as rejection. Instead, ask a different question. What is God making room for? Because heaven rarely removes without intending to replace, restore, protect, or elevate. The story is not ending. The chapter is changing. The author is still writing, and the pages ahead may contain blessings that would never have arrived had the previous chapter remained unchanged. So, as we begin this journey together, consider this possibility. The person God removes this June may not be taken from your life to diminish you. They may be removed so that you can finally become everything you were created to be. And when viewed through that lens, what once appeared to be a painful loss may reveal itself as one of the greatest gifts God has ever given you. There is a truth that many people struggle to accept because it challenges the way we naturally see relationships, circumstances, and even loss itself. We tend to believe that if someone leaves our life, something has gone wrong. We assume that every separation is a sign of failure, rejection, or misfortune. Yet there are moments when God removes a person from your life, not because He is punishing you, but because He is protecting you. Not because He is taking something valuable away, but because He is preserving something even more valuable within you. The difficulty is that divine protection rarely announces itself in advance. It often arrives disguised as disappointment. It comes wrapped in confusion, unanswered questions, and emotions we did not expect to feel. When a person suddenly becomes distant, when a friendship weakens, when a relationship changes beyond recognition, the first instinct of the human heart is to chase understanding. We want explanations. We want reasons. We want certainty. Yet God does not always provide immediate answers. Sometimes, He simply asks us to trust that His vision extends beyond the horizon we can see. Imagine a traveler walking through a dense forest. He follows a path he believes will lead him safely to his destination. Then, without warning, he encounters a barrier that prevents him from continuing. He may become frustrated and wonder why his progress has been interrupted. What he cannot see is that beyond that barrier lies a danger he would never have recognized until it was too late. The obstacle that appears to stand against him is actually standing between him and harm. In much the same way, God often removes people because He sees what we cannot. He sees hidden motives that have not yet revealed themselves. He sees influences slowly shaping our character in unhealthy ways. He sees future consequences that remain invisible to our limited perspective. While we focus on the comfort of the present relationship, God focuses on the condition of our future. Many chosen people have discovered that the individuals they once begged God to keep in their lives were later revealed to be obstacles to their peace, growth, or purpose. At first, their departure felt unbearable. It felt unfair. It felt like something precious had been stolen. Yet with time came clarity. What once looked like loss began to look like rescue. The challenge is that clarity rarely arrives before obedience. We usually understand God's reasons after the season has passed, not while we are living through it. This is why faith becomes so important. Faith is not merely believing when everything makes sense. Faith is trusting the wisdom of God when nothing makes sense at all. There are people who enter your life carrying a certain assignment. Some are meant to encourage you. Some are meant to teach you. Some are meant to reveal strengths you never knew existed. Others reveal weaknesses that need attention. Yet not everyone is meant to remain forever. A relationship can serve a purpose without being permanent. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that because something was right for one season, it must be right for every season. But life does not work that way. The coat that protected you during winter becomes uncomfortable in summer. The tools needed for one stage of construction may become unnecessary once the building is complete. Likewise, certain relationships fulfill their purpose and then reach their natural conclusion. God understands seasons better than we do. We often become attached to familiarity. Even when a relationship no longer brings peace, growth, or spiritual strength, we may cling to it simply because it is familiar. Familiarity can create the illusion of security. We fear what will happen if the connection disappears. We wonder whether we will be lonely, whether we will find someone else, whether life will ever feel normal again. Yet God is not limited by our fears. He is not dependent upon one person to accomplish His plans for your life. He is not scrambling to find alternatives because someone walked away. Long before you met that individual, God already knew every chapter of your story. He knew who would enter. He knew who would leave. He knew which relationships would strengthen you and which ones would eventually need to end. This is why the departure of one person should never convince you that your future has been ruined. God's plans are not so fragile that they can be destroyed by a single human decision. If someone leaves your life and God allows it, then you can trust that He remains fully capable of guiding you toward everything He has prepared. There is another reason God sometimes removes people from our lives. Certain relationships quietly consume our energy without us realizing it. They create constant anxiety, confusion, distraction, or emotional exhaustion. Because these burdens accumulate gradually, we become accustomed to carrying them. We forget what peace feels like. We accept tension as normal. We tolerate behaviors that slowly drain our joy. Then the relationship ends. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable. The absence feels strange, but eventually something remarkable happens. The soul begins to breathe again. The mind becomes clearer. The heart becomes lighter. What once seemed unbearable gradually reveals itself as freedom. Many people mistake attachment for destiny. They assume that because they care deeply about someone, that person must belong in their future. Yet, love alone does not determine God's purpose. A relationship can involve genuine affection and still not align with the direction God intends for your life. God is concerned not only with who makes you happy today, but also with who helps you become the person you are called to be tomorrow. That perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, "Why did this person leave?" the wiser question becomes, "What is God protecting me from?" Instead of focusing only on what has been removed, consider what may be preserved. Your peace may be preserved. Your faith may be preserved. Your purpose may be preserved. Your future may be preserved. The chosen one must remember that God sees the entire landscape, while we see only a small portion of the road ahead. We evaluate situations based on present emotions. God evaluates them based on eternal wisdom. So if God removes someone from your life this June, resist the urge to immediately label the event as a tragedy. Resist the temptation to assume that every ending is evidence of failure. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection. Sometimes what appears to be loss is actually protection. Sometimes the hand that closes one door is the same hand preparing to open another. And one day, perhaps months from now, or even years from now, you may look back upon this moment with a completely different understanding. The pain that once confused you may suddenly make sense. The separation that once felt cruel may reveal itself as mercy. The person you thought you needed may turn out to be the very person standing between you and the life God intended for you all along. When that day comes, you will realize that God's removal was never an accident. It was an act of wisdom, an act of protection, and above all, an act of love. One of the most difficult lessons in life is learning that not every relationship is meant to last forever. We often enter connections believing they will remain exactly as they are. We imagine that the people who walk beside us today will continue walking beside us tomorrow, next year, and perhaps for the rest of our lives. Yet life unfolds according to seasons, and God often uses those seasons to shape, refine, and prepare us for what lies ahead. There is a tendency within the human heart to measure the value of a relationship by its duration. We assume that if something ends, it must have failed. If someone leaves, we conclude that the connection was meaningless. But that is not how God sees things. A relationship can fulfill its purpose completely, even if it was never meant to be permanent. Think about the seasons of nature. Spring does not apologize for becoming summer. Summer does not cling desperately when autumn arrives. Autumn does not resist the coming of winter. Each season serves a purpose, contributes something necessary, and then gives way to the next stage. If one season attempted to remain forever, growth would cease. Change is not the enemy of life. It is often the very mechanism through which life continues. The same principle applies to people. Some individuals enter your life to encourage you during a difficult chapter. Some arrive to teach lessons that could not be learned any other way. Others help you discover strengths you never knew you possessed. Some challenge your assumptions, stretch your faith, and reveal areas where growth is needed. Their role is significant. But significance does not automatically mean permanence. One of the reasons separations hurt so deeply is because we confuse assignment with ownership. We begin to believe that because someone has played an important role in our lives, they belong there indefinitely. Yet people are not possessions to be held forever. They are fellow travelers, each moving through their own journey under God's direction. Sometimes God sends a person into your life for a specific purpose and a specific season. When that purpose has been fulfilled, the relationship naturally changes. This does not erase the value of what was shared. It simply means that the chapter has reached its conclusion. Many chosen ones struggle with this reality because they are loyal by nature. They invest deeply. They care sincerely. They fight to preserve relationships, even when those relationships have begun to drift beyond the boundaries of God's purpose. Loyalty is a beautiful quality But loyalty becomes dangerous when it causes you to remain attached to something God is gently asking you to release. There are moments when we spend enormous amounts of energy trying to keep a door open that heaven is quietly closing. We analyze every conversation. We revisit every memory. We search for ways to restore what once existed. Yet the harder we struggle, the more exhausted we become. Not because the relationship lacked value, but because we are attempting to preserve a season that has already ended. The truth is that God rarely removes something meaningful without first allowing it to accomplish its purpose. The friendship that shaped your character, the mentor who guided your growth, the companion who stood beside you during hardship. All of these relationships may have been exactly what you needed at that particular moment in your life. Their value is not diminished simply because the season changed. A teacher remains important even after the class ends. A bridge remains valuable even after you have crossed the river. A lamp remains useful even after the sun rises. Likewise, people can profoundly impact your life without remaining in it forever. One reason God allows seasons to change is because growth often requires movement. If every relationship remained exactly the same, many people would never evolve. They would stay in familiar patterns, comfortable routines, and predictable environments. Yet God is constantly calling His people forward. Sometimes the relationships that once supported your growth begin to limit it. This does not necessarily mean anyone is wrong or bad. It simply means that your paths are no longer aligned in the same way. The direction God is leading, you may differ from the direction someone else is called to pursue. That reality can be painful because we naturally want everyone we love to accompany us into every chapter. Yet not everyone is assigned to every stage of the journey. A person may walk with you through the valley, but not the mountain. Someone may help you survive a storm, but not be part of the harvest that follows. Another may share your beginnings, but not your destination. These truths can feel uncomfortable because they challenge our desire for permanence. We want certainty, we want guarantees. We want relationships that never change and circumstances that never shift. Yet growth requires flexibility, and faith requires trust. The chosen one must learn that holding on to expired seasons often creates unnecessary suffering. When God is preparing something new, clinging to the old can prevent you from fully embracing what lies ahead. Imagine carrying a suitcase filled with items from a previous journey. At first, the weight seems manageable, but as the road continues, the burden becomes heavier. Eventually, you discover that many of the things you are carrying are no longer necessary. They served a purpose once, but they no longer serve the path ahead. Relationships can become like that suitcase. Memories remain precious. Lessons remain valuable. Gratitude remains appropriate. But carrying yesterday into every tomorrow can hinder progress. This is why wisdom teaches us to appreciate seasons without trying to imprison them. Not every goodbye is evidence of failure. Not every distance is evidence of betrayal. Not every ending is evidence that something went wrong. Sometimes a relationship has simply completed its assignment. God may be making room for new influences, new opportunities, new friendships, and new experiences that align with the next chapter of your life. But these new blessings often require space. A room already filled to capacity cannot easily receive something new. The difficulty is that we often focus so intensely on what is leaving that we fail to notice what is arriving. We stare at the closing door and miss the opening window. We mourn the finished chapter and neglect the unwritten pages. We become so occupied with preserving the past that we cannot fully participate in the future. Yet God is always working ahead of you. When one season ends, He is already preparing another. When one connection fades, He remains aware of every person, opportunity, and divine appointment that awaits you. The chosen one must therefore learn a sacred balance. Appreciate what was, accept what is, and trust what will be. Appreciate the people who walked beside you. Honor the lessons they brought. Cherish the memories that shaped you. But do not assume that God's goodness is confined to the relationships of yesterday. The God who provided companionship in one season is fully capable of providing guidance, encouragement, and connection in the next. So if someone drifts away this June, do not immediately conclude that your story is falling apart. Consider the possibility that God is simply turning the page. The person may have fulfilled exactly what they were meant to fulfill. Their role may have been beautiful, meaningful, and complete. And rather than grieving as though everything has been lost, recognize that some of life's greatest blessings arrive only after we release our grip on seasons that have already served their purpose. For not every relationship is meant for every season, and sometimes the greatest act of faith is trusting God enough to let the chapter end when He says it is time for the next one to begin. There are moments in life when faith is easy. There are seasons when the road ahead appears clear, when prayers seem to receive immediate answers, and when circumstances align so perfectly that trusting God feels almost effortless. During those times, it is natural to believe that our faith is strong. Yet the true measure of faith is not found when everything makes sense. It is revealed when nothing makes sense at all. One of the greatest challenges you will face is learning to trust God when He does not explain Himself. The human mind craves understanding. We want reasons for every event, explanations for every loss, and answers for every disappointment. We believe that if we could only see the full picture, our hearts would find peace. Yet God often asks us to walk forward without revealing the entire path. This can be especially difficult when someone leaves your life, when a relationship changes unexpectedly, when a trusted connection fades, or when a person you deeply cared about suddenly becomes part of your past. Countless questions begin to rise within you. Why did this happen? Why now? What could I have done differently? Was there something I failed to see? The silence that follows these questions can feel overwhelming. Yet it is often in that silence that faith is born. Faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is the decision to trust even when the questions remain unanswered. Many people mistakenly believe that understanding must come before trust. They wait for every mystery to be solved before they surrender to God's plan. But if complete understanding were required, faith would no longer be faith. It would simply be certainty. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean on a dark night. The moonlight reflects across the water, but only a small portion of the sea is visible. Beyond that narrow stretch lies an immense expanse hidden from your sight. Your inability to see the entire ocean does not mean the ocean ceases to exist. It simply means your vision is limited. The same is true of God's plans. We often see only a small fragment of the story. God sees the beginning, the middle, and the end simultaneously. He understands how today's events connect to tomorrow's opportunities. He knows how a painful separation may lead to a future blessing. He sees dangers we cannot detect and possibilities we cannot imagine. Yet, because our perspective is limited, we sometimes interpret temporary confusion as permanent defeat. The chosen one must learn a different perspective. Instead of demanding immediate explanations, learn to trust the character of God. When you cannot understand his actions, remember his nature. When his decisions seem mysterious, remember his wisdom. When his timing feels difficult, remember his faithfulness. A child does not always understand why a loving parent says no. The child sees only the present desire. The parent sees the broader consequences. The refusal may feel unfair from the child's perspective, but it is rooted in wisdom the child cannot yet comprehend. Likewise, there are moments when God's decisions appear confusing, because we are evaluating them through the narrow lens of present circumstances. You may be mourning a relationship that God sees as an obstacle. You may be chasing a connection that God knows cannot accompany you into your future. You may be holding tightly to something that heaven is gently loosening from your hands. At the moment, it feels painful. At the moment, it feels unfair. At the moment, it feels impossible to understand. But faith invites you to believe that God's vision extends beyond your own. One reason this lesson is so important is because life will not always provide immediate clarity. There are seasons when answers arrive quickly. There are also seasons when months or years pass before the reasons become visible. During those waiting periods, your faith becomes the bridge between uncertainty and peace. Without faith, every unanswered question becomes a burden. Without faith, every delay feels like abandonment. Without faith, every closed door appears meaningless. But with faith, even mystery can coexist with hope. The chosen one learns that understanding is a gift, but trust is a choice. You may not know why a certain person left your life. You may not understand why a relationship that seemed promising suddenly ended. You may not see the purpose behind a painful separation. Yet you can still choose trust. Trust does not require complete information. Trust requires confidence in the one who possesses complete information. There is something remarkable about looking back on past chapters of life. Often, the events that once caused the greatest confusion later reveal unexpected wisdom. Situations that seemed disastrous eventually expose hidden blessings. Relationships that ended painfully are later recognized as necessary conclusions. Opportunities that disappeared are eventually replaced by better ones. What changed? Not the past. Your perspective. Time allowed you to see what God already knew from the beginning. This realization should encourage you whenever you face uncertainty in the present. The same God who proved faithful in previous seasons remains faithful now. The same wisdom that guided you before continues guiding you today. Faith means believing that even when you cannot trace his hand, you can trust his heart. Many people spend years fighting battles that faith could have resolved in a moment. They replay old conversations, revisit old wounds, and analyze old disappointments, hoping to discover the missing explanation that will finally bring peace. Yet peace rarely comes from having every answer. Peace comes from knowing that God's sovereignty is greater than your uncertainty. There is freedom in accepting that you do not need to understand everything. You do not need to know every reason. You do not need to see every detail. You do not need to predict every outcome. Your responsibility is not to control the future. Your responsibility is to trust the one who does. This does not mean pretending that pain does not exist. Faith is not denial. Faith acknowledges the hurt while refusing to let the hurt become the final authority. Faith admits that a separation is difficult while still believing that God is working through it. Faith recognizes tears without surrendering to despair. The chosen one understands that God's silence is not evidence of his absence. A teacher is often silent during a test. A builder works behind walls before revealing the finished structure. A gardener works beneath the soil long before visible growth appears. In the same way, God often works in unseen ways during seasons of uncertainty. Just because you cannot see the answer does not mean the answer is not developing. Just because you do not understand the process does not mean the process lacks purpose. Just because the road is unclear does not mean there is no destination. So if this June brings a separation you cannot explain, resist the urge to measure God's faithfulness by your level of understanding. Do not assume that confusion means He has abandoned you. Do not interpret mystery as evidence that He has forgotten you. Instead, remember that faith shines brightest when certainty is absent. Remember that God's wisdom reaches places your understanding cannot. Remember that His plans are not limited by what you can currently see. And, perhaps most importantly, remember that one day the pieces may come together in ways you never expected. What seems confusing now may become clear later. What feels